David Cameron has said he is determined to reform Britain's relationship with the EU as he seeks to kickstart talks with European leaders on his plans. At a summit in Latvia, he is making his case for change in the EU following the Conservatives' election victory. The Prime Minister said he expected lots of ups and downs in the process but wanted to giving people a proper choice in a referendum due by 2017. EU leaders are in Riga to discuss relations with ex-Soviet states. But it is the first opportunity Mr. Cameron has had to discuss his proposed reforms since winning a second term in Downing Street. He will meet German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Francois Hollande, regarded as Europe's most influential leaders, for one-on-one talks next week as he seeks to build momentum behind his reform agenda. Friday's gathering of EU leaders was an opportunity to start some of the discussions about reform of the EU, he told reporters. All I will say is that there will be ups and downs. You will hear one day that this is possible, the next day something is impossible. But one thing through all this will be constant, and this is my determination to deliver for the British people a reform of the EU so they get a proper choice in that referendum we will hold before the end of 2017, that will be constant. Context of changes. Mr. Cameron is committed to holding an in/out referendum on Britain's membership of the EU by the end of 2017, but there is speculation it could be held next year to avoid a clash with elections in France and Germany. Legislation paving the way for the UK referendum is expected to be published next Thursday, the day after the Queen opens Parliament. The Riga summit will be dominated by the EU's relationship with Russia and its neighbours, including Ukraine. BBC Deputy Political Editor James Landale said Mr. Cameron would use the summit to sound out other European leaders about what they might be willing to accept before the start of intricate negotiations in the coming months. Other EU leaders, he added, were scared witless by the possibility of the UK leaving the EU and were willing to listen and consider a deal, but there were some things, such as changes to freedom of movement rules, which were sacrosanct. A British official said Friday's talks would be broad brush rather than focusing on specific demands. The focus of these discussions today is to set out the reason why he is doing this, the views of the British people about the EU, the fact that they are not happy with the status quo and what they need to change, they said. Mr. Cameron has not revealed the full details of what he is seeking from any changes, but he is expected to demand an opt-out from its core principles of forging an ever-closer union between member states. He will also try to get more powers to block or opt out of new EU laws, and for restrictions on welfare benefits for migrants until they have lived in the UK for 4 years. In a speech on Thursday, the Prime Minister said welfare changes would be an absolute requirement in the renegotiation. Mr. Cameron has said he wants the UK to stay in a reformed EU but has so far refused to say whether he would start calling for Britain to leave if he does not get what he wants. Optimistic. Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb said he was hopeful a deal could be reached which would be satisfactory to the British people. Finland is very much in favor of the pro-reform agenda that David Cameron drives. We believe that there are issues that can be discussed with Britain, he said. There is no point in putting up any barriers at this particular stage and we're all ears. Ireland's Europe Minister Dara Murphy said he was optimistic the UK would remain within the EU. Much of what has been suggested and proposed to date by David Cameron would be to the advantage of all of the people of the European Union, particularly in the space of regulation, he said. But Estonian Prime Minister Taavi Rõivas warned he would oppose any attempt to roll back the free movement of labour in the EU. I wouldn't scroll back the basic freedoms, but saying no to all ideas of change would be wrong as well. This week, a number of UK business leaders started to highlight the potential implications of the referendum, with the president of the CBI said businesses should speak out early in favour of remaining in a reformed EU. The Labour Party, SNP, Plaid Cymru, and the Lib Dems are in favour of staying in the EU. UKIP, which got almost 4 million votes but only 1 MP in the election, want to leave.